Hi, everyone. It's a very warm welcome to the second module of the Future of Business course. We're so excited that you're able to join us live for this webinar. We're now 2 weeks in, and I've seen that many of you have already introduced yourselves, and you're making the effort to connect with one another on the course platform, which is really good. Remember that a large component of this course is the peer engagement. And we have people enrolled from companies in various industries, different countries across the whole world. So it's a unique opportunity for networking, for partnership, and of course for learning. And we really want you to take advantage of that as you envision new possibilities for your company and for yourself as a change maker. So while you might just see my face right now from the Ashoka side of things, you can rest assured that there's a very hardworking team behind the scenes, and they're always available to help you on the platform. So specifically, my colleagues Isa and Andrea are ready to support you on this journey, and they can also assist with any technical issues that you might have, either during this webinar or later on. So feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions for our guest speaker today, who I'm very excited to have with us today, you can also put those in the comments section, which is right under the live webinar screen. And we'll try and have as many of them answered as we can, time allowing, of course. So today, as I mentioned, we have the very first of 3 live webinars, which are an integral part of this learning journey. We are streaming via YouTube, so there may be a slight delay or time lag between YouTube and the NovoEd platform that you're on. So just be aware of that as we interact today. And while we give it a few more minutes to allow everyone time to connect and to join us, I want to let you know that you can earn extra points for watching this webinar live. And this applies to every other webinar on this course. So while it's on, you'll see a survey question at the bottom of this page asking if you're watching it live. So go ahead and click yes. And if you don't see the survey during the session, just try refreshing your page and I'm sure it'll come up. Okay, so this week being the second week of the course, we've been discussing various elements as an introduction to social entrepreneurship and the corporate world. Now, I know it's not new to some of you, but of course for others as well who have joined us, this is a very new concept. So we thought it would be great to have our very first guest expert here today to expand a bit on that. And his name is Heiko Spitzek. So he's the professor at Fundação Dom Cabral in Brazil, and he heads the Sustainability Management Research Center there. His teaching experience includes courses on social entrepreneurship as well as sustainable business for MSc, MBA, and executive MBA students. Heiko has worked with senior executives, directors, and board members, aligning sustainability and strategy at several of the world's biggest companies. His teaching is informed by more than 10 years of consulting experience, as well as academic research, and his publications have appeared in numerous international journals. He's also a catalyst for the region in Brazil for the Global League of Entrepreneurs. I could go on, but Heiko, it's a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So as we jump straight in, please could you tell us a little bit about your professional journey, including your role now as director at the Sustainability Management Research Center?
Well, I think it all started during the PhD travel I had, where I was investigating the question, what, if anything, do corporations learn from NGO critique? And you don't have many times in your life where you can dedicate yourself to one single question for a couple of years. And one of the insights I got out of that research was to understand that if the corporation wants to learn from NGO critique, you need to have somebody as a translator working in that organization. So you need to have somebody to understand what is the concern of the NGOs, how does that impact business, and how do I translate that into the talk for our financial director, for our CEO, for other C-level executives. And you need to be able to translate that back into the NGO language. So they understand that the company is moving forward and that they're acting on their critique. And then in 2008, I discovered a publication from Sustainability, John Elkington and the crew, who later founded the League of Entrepreneurs, that was called The Social Entrepreneur, a field guide for change makers. And I found it extremely interesting because in my PhD research, I always looked at critical interactions when the corporations were pressured by NGOs to do something different. And the entrepreneurs were acting not by pressure, so not on a reactive attitude, but on a proactive attitude, selling their project and saying, actually, guys, if we look at social and environmental factors, that makes a lot of business sense. Why don't we generate new revenues and do stuff which is good for the planet and good for the society at the same time? And I found later when I moved to Brazil, so I'm here since 2010, then Brazil is a very vibrant space for this because there are a lot of companies engaged using their business as a platform for positive impact. So you have a huge amount of B Corps here. You have, I think Brazil is the second largest group of companies who have signed up to the Global Compact of the United Nations. So there's a very vivid discussion about business and how it can be used for impact. So that's a little bit the space where I'm coming from. And my work is pretty much concentrated on seeing like how to convince senior executives of putting sustainability more strategically into their business, and to help entrepreneurs come up with new ideas, new projects, which on the one hand side, obviously always needs to have a good argumentation for why is this good for business, but at the same time helps us to deal with the global big issues like climate change, diversity, inclusion, etc.
Right. It sounds like a very interesting journey so far. And from what I'm hearing you say, your role was really to make the world of the NGOs and the world of the corporates collide in a way that makes sense for the greater good, which sounds really interesting. And I think we're learning a lot about social entrepreneurship. We'd love to hear from you what your take is, what that means to you, and how that actually differs from conventional entrepreneurship as we've always understood it.
Yeah. The comparison I always do, like I think if you're in the space of social entrepreneurship, it's kind of impossible that you never heard of Muhammad Yunus, who invented the concept of microcredit. And I always joke in my classes that like anybody here knows a banker who, for founding a bank, got the Peace Nobel Prize. And then the people go like, what? Like banking and Peace Nobel Prize doesn't really go together. But some of the folks then say like, no, there's Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. He invented the idea of microcredit. And I find it interesting then to compare that with entrepreneurs because let's take Yunus. He founded the Grameen Bank in the end of the 70s. And in 2007, he got the Peace Nobel Prize. So it took him 30 years. And when he got the Peace Nobel Prize, Grameen Bank had roughly 7.5 million customers, out of which 2 million got out of poverty. It's huge, but it took 30 years. Now compare that to M-Pesa, which is an initiative which has been run by Safaricom and Vodafone in Africa and Kenya, where two entrepreneurs, Susie Loney and Nick Huge, launched a mobile banking solution, and that already in 2008, which allowed the people, at that time, Kenya had about 20% of its population had access to financial services, 80% didn't. So 80% of the Kenyan population didn't have bank account, didn't have credit card. They did all their financial transactions in cash. Now just imagine like paying all your bills in cash and carrying cash and the risk that entails for being robbed, and et cetera, et cetera. But working for Vodafone, they realized that, man, 60% of the population have a mobile phone. You know, why don't I use this as a platform to enable financial inclusion for these people? Within the first year, they had 1 million new customers. And the latest numbers I found on the net was like 2022. They have expanded to various African countries. They're now serving more than 50 million people who are transferring more than $314 billion on the system per year. So this for me shows the comparison between Yunus, 30 years, you know, and then 7.5 million customers, and Vodafone M-Pesa in the first year, 1 million customers. So if you can turn an existing corporation and show to your boss that if you work, in that case, financial inclusion, and that can become a growth driver for your business in the region, you know, your boss will say like, you know, how can I put my company's power behind your idea, foster inclusion, and scale that really fast because it's good for my business and it's good for the people at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's a really great point to segue into diving deeper into entrepreneurship, because I think the example from Yunus to M-Pesa, which, as you rightly said, mobile money has been such a game changer on the continent. But as you said, again, they had the power of the company behind them. So in your experience, in your publications, in all this work that you've done, what is it about social entrepreneurship that really, you know, cracks that nut? What's the secret sauce in it?
I think there are a lot of things that need to come together. First and foremost, you need the leadership team which is open to this. And normally, when business is doing well, leadership is more open, you know. If business is not doing so well, leadership might be much more conservative in its approach. So working with CEOs here in our program, which we have at Fundação Dom Cabral, which is called CEO's Legacy, I always hear from the legacy project these CEOs are running, especially if they're like, if you have a CEO which is close to being retired, that's a perfect spot as well, because then they think about not only the money they're making and the value they're creating for the shareholders, but they're also leaving to say, hold on a second, now I made all this money for these people, but this is not a legacy. So what's my legacy project? And then if you come in this moment and the company is doing well, and you say like, I have an idea for you, you know, I think that might be the perfect spot. So one concrete example for this was Gib Bullock. Gib Bullock founded Accenture Development Partnerships, which brings the power of Accenture Consulting to leverage the impact of big NGOs like Médecins Sans Frontières and others. And he had this idea on a sabbatical where he was helping companies after the war in Yugoslavia to build up their businesses. And when he came back, he wrote a fake Financial Times article in which his CEO would be getting a prize awarded at the World Economic Forum for having launched Accenture Development Partnerships and putting Accenture at the service of the NGOs. He sent that off to his CEO, which got him a lunch conversation with him, and then the allowance to set up ADP as a not-for-loss business within Accenture. So it doesn't add to the bottom line, but it doesn't generate costs either. And as it is a talent development and talent retention program, which delivers high value to the head of human resources, it's still running strong today, even now that Gib has left Accenture.
Well, I hope that gives some ideas to those that are watching live. I think those are some smart strategies on his behalf. And also, again, just a reminder to those that are watching live, if you have any questions for Heiko, please feel free to shoot. You can put them in the comment section just below the screen. So, Heiko, one of the articles that we're reading as part of the course material is actually a book that you co-authored with David Grayson and Melody McLaren. It's called Social Entrepreneurism and All That Jazz. So, in that article, you give several really good definitions of a social entrepreneur. And one that's stuck with me is two-thirds change maker, one-third troublemaker. So, can you share with us the thinking behind that and how much trouble are we actually talking about here?
Well, actually, the quote comes from Gib Bullock himself, like the example I just mentioned.
Okay.
And I think what he means by that is like you can't drive change and fit in at the same time.
Mhm.
So another entrepreneur, Humberto Sardenberg, who works at Icatu Seguros, and I know we have like some insurance people here in the room as well. So he said like one of the approaches he has to the young people joining Icatu here in Brazil is to say like, you're at the right space if you want to drive impact because most of the people here in Brazil, they don't prepare for their retirement. So how do you say, the poverty of the elderly is a quite common phenomenon here in Brazil. So if you help us to get these people into a financial comfortable situation when they're older, that also already will drive a lot of social impact. But as he's driving like change initiatives, and that with the mandate of his bosses, I remember him once saying like, okay, listen, boss, you're getting a lot of noise and criticism from this guy and this guy and this guy in the organization, which actually means that I'm doing my job of driving change. Because these are the guys who are going to lose something or they're going to do stuff differently. And of course, they need complain. They will not be happy because they're resistant to change and I'm driving change. So the more they complain, the more I'm doing my job. So, and I find it always very interesting, like looking at language as well. In English, we say like, you work in an organization. So somebody organized something, and then you get a job description. So this is your job. So this is your, like in the whole machinery, this is what you have to do. In Portuguese, the name for employee is functionary. So you need to function. It's a whole machine metaphor, of course. And the moment you step out and you want to be an entrepreneur, a part of your functionary stops to work for the organization and you dedicate some time and some energy to an innovation project which changes the culture, changes processes, invents a new product, a new service, a new business model. And that's why your line manager is getting very nervous because you're less functioning and working on an agenda. Nobody knows it's going to go well. So this is where the change maker and troublemaker comes in, because you stir up the organization. You say like, and I think we can do things differently, and I think we can do things better, and you bump up against limits, and that's when the organizational immune system like goes like virus, kick it out, isolate, kick it out, And in that moment, you need a sponsor who believes in you because you have delivered before. And they trust you that you know the business and you know what you're doing, and that there's a significant chance of success. And that's why they say like, no virus, don't kick out, keep on going. I'll open the doors for you and I'll like kill the fires you're setting in the organization because I know they're necessary to get us to a different stage where we want to go.
Right. No, thanks for unpacking that, Heiko. I do also want to talk about your new book, and I think there are a lot of fascinating streams in there. But just before we do, just before we jump into the corporate hero's journey, I just want to bring a question from Laura, who is asking, how can business leaders or managers be more involved in supporting social entrepreneurship ideas? And how do you build a culture in companies that leverages social impact?
Well, Laura, that's a brilliant question. From a leadership perspective, what I always feel is like people are not challenged to become entrepreneurs, you know? So if you provide an opportunity and ideally in a structured way where people can present ideas and get feedback and get help on these ideas, because the other thing is like I see a lot of companies now, okay, send your ideas. These are all crappy ideas. So why should we support them? So if you don't help your employees to get to a structured pitch and capacitate them to chew on their idea and to think critically about their idea, so they're not presenting something half-baked, but something they have thought through. And they thought about, okay, how is this impacting the business? Am I reducing cost? Am I bringing new revenues? Am I just having reputational gains or whatever? So all that needs to be thought through before you present to leadership. So if you help your employees to come up with a pitch, and as a functionary / employee, you're normally in the work routine, you're never challenged to do a pitch. You're not having any entrepreneurial spirit because you're in an organization in which you need to function. So don't come up with new ideas normally. So challenge them to present ideas. And to bring you a more concrete example, like we have worked with BASF here in Brazil. We've set up an entrepreneurship program, which or was presential in their Sao Paulo offices, or we had an online course. But all that triggered to them providing a pitch based on, we listened to the C-level executives first. What are your priorities for business? What are your top social and environmental concerns? How do you want to use these social and environmental concerns to favor your business? And then we said, 1 year, they would say, the issue is climate change, and we want to generate new revenues by providing climate change solutions to our clients. And then we set the guys and said, okay, you can present any idea, but know that your leadership team is interested in climate change and solutions that bring in new revenues. So if you want to have a higher chance that your idea is being accepted, why don't you work on those topics? Mm-hmm. And then over the years, we were able to train more or less 1,000 employees. They more or less submitted 90 projects, out of which more than 40% got implemented. So, and BASF had a global fund which helped them to co-finance and have more patient capital for financing these entrepreneurial initiatives. Mm-hmm. So challenging your employees with a structured project, getting to a pitch, selecting the best ideas, doing a mentoring and acceleration phase, getting that to a level where you can really pitch it to senior executives, and then the senior executives can make a bridge to say, I said we want this, and I can see that these initiatives are exactly delivering what I said I wanted. The chance of implementation is really high.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Heiko. Laura, I hope you are answered, and if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to let us know. Heiko, for now, please let us proceed to embark on the corporate hero's journey. So please take us through that.
Okay. Well, the book you are having right now is working on the jazz metaphor, which was kind of interesting because Melody, which is one of the co-authors, She's a jazz piano player and also passionate about photographing jazz events. And when we were doing this research, she was like, I get the same feeling when I'm talking to jazz musicians. The conversation is so interesting with these entrepreneurs. I don't want them ever to stop. They're really amazing people. And that's where she started to play with the jazz metaphor to say, like, okay, how how do you become a member in a jazz band, and how do you need to improvise as an entrepreneur, just like a jazz player? How do you need to become, when you join an organization, you need to become a good sideman, like showing that you support the band before you're able to play a solo, and doing an entrepreneurial project as a solo. You don't, play a solo on stage without having like experience with your band before. Because if you play a solo which is death metal in an organization which is classical music, leadership will not pretty much like it. And I wanted to give the reflection on entrepreneurship a more edutainable twist. And at the conversations we had at the League of Entrepreneurs in our annual gatherings, a lot of people identified with the hero's journey, which is from Joseph Campbell. I don't know, if you know the book. It's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And Joseph Campbell was a mythologist and comparative anthropologist. And he said basically all the great myths, all the stories, Jesus, Buddha, everything, they follow the same pattern. And it's these 17 stages. And then there was a guy who fell in love with the book, which, by coincidence, is George Lucas. So Star Wars was completely built on the 17 stages. And George Lucas and Joseph Campbell, they became friends, and worked partially together on the narrative of Star Wars. So to make the knowledge about entrepreneurship more appealing and more sexy, and to potentially have a cultural platform like Star Wars to work with, I wrote the Corporate Hero's Journey. I wanted to call it Corporate Jedis, but the legal department of Routledge, my publisher, said like maybe Walt Disney will sue us for this, so maybe change the title. But the book is basically the hero's journey, all the 17 stages, and always brings in like, okay, why is the stage important for Campbell? How do you recognize the stage in Star Wars? And I know a person, an entrepreneur, who at that stage, confronted that challenge. Like the first, for example, is the adventure, the call to adventure. Going back to the example I already used, Gib Bullock. Gib Bullock worked at Accenture, and he was riding the tube like millions of Londoners do every day, like ordinary stuff. He was reading the Financial Times like millions of people do every day. And he found a small ad of Voluntary Social International looking for business consultants who can help small businesses to reorganize themselves after the war. And that was his call to adventure. He embarked on that voluntary initiative that changed his way of seeing like how business can be really useful to society and not just something which makes rich people richer. And then he came back and said, like, I want to bring that experience and that thinking to the maximum amount of people possible. And that's why he founded Accenture Development Partnerships. So the book is structured in this way because it is trying to help people like you guys who are interested in entrepreneurship to identify where am I on my journey, and what are the next steps I can take, and what are the tools I can use in order to advance on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds very good. I hope everyone can get a hold of that. I think the tools will be very useful. And we'll speak a little bit more to that as we go. But I just wanted to bring in another couple of questions that we've received.
Of course.
One is from Asbjorn. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Who wants to know how change makers can pursue their ideas in bureaucratic environments. especially, with the example you gave about the virus and the fact that social entrepreneurship can be disruptive by its very nature. So in an established business where the corporate bureaucracy is overwhelming, how does
Yeah.
someone move that?
Well, first, I'll help you with your anchoring point. I know a lot of corporate entrepreneurs who talk about bureaucracy, and then I always try to challenge you to think about if you were an entrepreneur at the European Union or at your government institutions, and there are some of those, their resilience and bureaucracy challenge is way, way, way higher. So if they can make change, you can make it as well. And then I think, like, in the courses I do, I always ask people to put post-its, and I ask them to take the green post-its to say, like, okay, this is cool about my culture, of my organizational culture. And the red post-its to say, like, this is shit about the culture where I work. And we put it on the wall. And once it's on the wall, you can see the energy level is getting up again, because they say, like, whew, it's all there. And then I usually put a music, Brazilian music, which says, like, "No sou eu que me navega o mar." It's not me steering the boat, it's the sea steering the boat. To say, like, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to work with the environment in which you are. So use the currents which are at your favor, use the winds which are at your favor, and try to avoid the currents and the winds which are not to your favor. But don't blame it on the environment. There's a way you can work with it normally. And, like, Asbjørn, I know, like, you're not happy with my answers so far. So let me give you two tools. One is clients. If you convince a key client to do a pilot with you, your boss has no chance of stopping you. I have never seen a boss saying, like, we're not going to do what a key client asks us to do. So, if the client is in and if he's willing to pay for a pilot, hard to stop you. The second is when it comes from global leadership, new strategy or global support, or you have, like, a key sponsor in global. At BASF, we always joke, like, it's either coming from Germany or it's coming from the client. So these are two power cards you can play to convince your bosses. Of course, you need to be careful on how you do this. So you not want to piss them off. So you want to have them in the boat. But sometimes, skipping hierarchy, going to the higher level and say, like, this is what global asks us to do. So climate change was example at BASF was a global initiative. So that was an obvious one. But if a key client says, like, I want to do this with you, that's also a very strong argument.
And maybe we can just expand a little bit more on, some of the obstacles and challenges. And you mentioned resistance that social entrepreneurs face. And in the face of that, what strategies do you recommend for overcoming them? For example, one was about bureaucracy, as has just been mentioned. But are there other types of challenges that you may have recommendations for?
Yeah, like, in the book, I have this little graphic, which organizes the organization environment into 4 groups. One axis is, okay, is this people, the y-axis is to say, are they supportive or are they against my initiative? And the x-axis is about power. Do they have low power or do they have high power? So for the people who shout a lot, but they don't have power, these are the distractors. You can simply ignore them, you know. For the people who are powerful, but they're against your initiative, you either distract them and say like, no, I'm working on my business stuff, I'm functioning, I'm a good employee, I'm delivering on my, on my role, or you try to convince them over with what their bosses wish or what their clients ask, or with employee polls which show that your initiative will enhance employee satisfaction, whatever, you convince them, or convincing their children, convincing their wives, so at different conversations, they finally buy in, or you identify the people they listen to and you convince them, and then the discussions convinces these critics. Then you have fans. They don't have power, but they're in favor of your initiative. So gather them and empower them. Make their numbers count. And the most critical people are the sponsors. They are in favor of your initiative and they have high power. You need to engage with them, and you need to have a communication strategy to help those guys to be updated about the progress you're making, the struggles you're facing, and how they can support you. So this is a little bit the tool we use to navigate the political system of the organization. And of course, you need to go into details with that. But with having sponsorship, I think that helps a lot in an organization. And actually, I've never seen some entrepreneurial initiative coming to fruition without any senior sponsor involved. So this is a critical thing. I think the second thing, which, and especially I see this with the sustainability department, I have seen a lot of directors saying like, we cut our emissions by 20%. And so like, okay, how much did that save your company? Like, why? Well, how do I know? And like, you invested in energy efficiency measures. Yeah, we did. Okay, so what was the energy cost your company had before and after the initiatives? Oh, I don't know. Well, what the hell you don't know? This is why you get the tree hugger stick once you enter the boardroom. So come on, do your financials, understand how this is driving financial value or not. So I think that's if you don't talk business case, sorry folks, this is the language which is spoken on the C-level. And again, like if the company is going well and the company is gaining a lot of money and they have discretionary resources to spend, great. But if you want your initiative to survive, it needs to add some value to business. And at least if it's reputational value, it needs to be very clear what kind of reputational value we're talking about. So this, I think, is the second thing. And the third, and this is again why I use the hero's journey, because the hero's journey has become a template for Hollywood filmmaking. Of course, the Americans thought like 17 stages, that's a lot. Let's boil it down to 5, and that's the Pixar model, 5 stages on how you tell an engaging story. So the numbers and the stuff matters, but what convinces people is emotions and good stories. So, and I think that's the third way to overcome the barriers of resistance. Tell a good story and learn how to tell a story to different people. You need to have a story for your finance director. You have to have a story for your HR director. You have to have a story for your colleagues. You have to take a story for your clients. You have to take a story to the financial analysts in the market. So, but what's a story and how does it connect to corporate strategy? You have to have that balance right to say like, okay, how do I add value to strategy? What are the different people I need to get engaged? How are they positioned regarding my initiative? And how do I get them on board? or at least distracted enough that the others who are on the board say like, go ahead.
Okay. Those are some really excellent points there, Heiko. Thanks. Let's jump into the next question from Karen, who's asking, how can professionals in established industries like insurance drive social innovation from within, especially when company culture is so focused on profit? Is it better to look for like-minded people elsewhere?
Should I stay or should I go now?
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
there's also a chapter on this, but Karen, first, I had a friend at McKinsey in the Madrid office, 2007 or something, and they gathered a group of consultants working on sustainability, and they called themselves the Mec Raros, like the Mec Strange, because McKinsey Madrid was very much dominated by very conservative people, some Opus Dei members. And they were trying to get information about, okay, what are the trends on climate change? What are social environmental concerns? How can we make business with this? But their leaders didn't give them a lot of space. And when Ian Davis, I think it was this global CEO, then called the Global Climate Change Initiative and asked people to come to London to work on that, like all of those folks went to London. And then they designed the global strategy. And when Global decided, okay, let's do a rollout, and some offices who have been very, very engaged in the past on this topic, they selected Madrid. But no one was there anymore. Like they were just like the conservative partners sitting in Madrid, and then the hot ball dropped on their lap. Like, now I need to work on climate, and I don't have the consultants anymore. I'm like, okay, how can I do it? Which I remember she being very sad and questioning, like, does it make sense for me to work at McKinsey? And she was nearly leaving. And we got to the conclusion at the discussion is that, like, why don't you just kick ass at McKinsey and try to change things? And if it's not happening, first, you're going to learn a lot. And second, the worst thing that can happen to you is that they fire you, which is what you wanted in the first place. Nothing to lose, And there forbid my colleagues at Fundação Dom Cabral of the MBA hearing me. If you want to change, if you try to change an organization from the inside, you're going to learn more than any MBA can ever offer you. Because you're dealing with real politics. You're going to know how the organization reacts, where the immune system gets activated, where you get open doors, how And I think at the end, it's much more a fun ride of your career than just like simply buying into the corporate politics and the processes which have been established yet. So I think that's one part of the answer. The second is, of course, if that drains your energy and you're getting sick and you're not seeing hope and your leadership changes and they're not open to discussion, there comes a point where you need to leave. Because the rebellion is better served by you changing the organization than being drowned in energy by the organization you work with. And I want you to be part of the rebellion. And now one example of the insurance industry, and probably you have heard examples like this, but there was Michael Anthony. Michael Anthony was working at Allianz as a sustainability manager. And when Indonesia, I think it was 2004 or 2005, was hit by the tsunami, Allianz did what a lot of corporations do. They say, like, okay, let's collect some money and invest in recovering Indonesia. And for any euro the employees donate, Allianz is doubling the value. They collected €1 million. They sent Michael off to Indonesia, and when he got there, he said, like, holy moly, when I talk to these people, they ask myself, how do I rebuild my home if this is happening again? Like how can I secure the future of my family? How can I secure like the education of my children? How can I? It's like they're asking me for insurance products, basically. So what he did is like, okay, I have this €1 million. It's under the radar. Nobody's like really checking how I spent this money. So let's do 500,000 for reconstruction. And with the other 500,000, I'm playing microinsurance. Guess what happened? Like he became the boss of Allianz Microinsurance. They're now selling millions of insurances all around the world. And he then left Allianz for personal reasons, because I think like he then felt exactly what you were saying, like Karin. He felt like he potentially can drive more change in other structures. But he was able to, to set up a whole new field of business. But I know that he had very difficult conversations. I remember him saying, like, I had 5 minutes with the head of business in India, and he said, like, I have 10 seconds to talk about microinsurance. But he got him engaged in the end. So there is an intersection. And I think like insurance, like you guys are under heavy pressure from the reinsurance markets, especially from climate change and other big disasters, which are ruining their balance sheets. They're going to push that pressure to you guys. But I think at the same time, if you get the risk ratio right, there are a lot of products you guys can sell to the people to help people adjust to climate change and to other risks they might be facing.
Mm-hmm. Now, Heiko, Karen's question actually makes me think of another element of this, which I think is important to talk about. And, she's asking, should I look for like-minded people elsewhere? And I think the element of having like-minded people around you is so important. And that community to get support as entrepreneurs, as change makers is really critical. And of course, this is what you are doing as part of the League of Entrepreneurs. So could you speak a little bit into that to say, fine, your environment may not be as supportive, but can you actually create that community? Can you find that community so that you can continue to, fight in the rebellion, as you put it?
Yeah. It's kind of funny, like let's start with the external community, like the League of Entrepreneurs. If Maggie, one of the co-founders, she sent an email at the last meeting I went in Germany. She's like, I think it was February or March. She's like, we're meeting in November, 3 days in Berlin. No agenda, no, she didn't send any details. I got the email, I reserved my flights. Done. And I was not the only one. There were people flying in from Canada, from Africa, M-Pesa people from Safaricom were there, because it's a gathering of like-minded people. And I guess like some of you guys, when you heard the term entrepreneur, you had the same feeling like many of us had, like to say, wow, this is who I am. I'm not a troublemaker. I'm not the strange one out. I know I swim against the current, but I'm trying to push innovation. I'm trying to push impact, and I try to do this in a way that makes sense to our business. So, this is who I am. And then when they come to our gatherings, it's so refreshing because you don't have to explain yourself. We're all on the same wavelength, and the connections are too immediate. I always see this when we talk sustainable business as well at our business school. The people connect because they share the same values and the same attitude, which doesn't happen in a corporate finance class. Let's be honest. So having this external space is where you can just like re-energize, exchange thoughts about the barriers and problems you're facing with others who have been there and done that, and you potentially know 50 ways of how you potentially could be going about that. It's very refreshing and very, very, very great. So I'm, every time there's a global gathering, I'll try to be there.
Mhm.
Now, I think there's zero chance of not having similar people inside your organization. You know, their interest groups about diversity, their interest groups about, I don't know, climate change, etc., etc. So there are for sure people who are concerned about the same things you are concerned about. And trying to give them a voice and showing your organization you're not alone in this also helps. Like the Mecraros in Madrid who met at the lunch meeting, you know, that was the time they used to identify potential projects, but it's also a time where they say like, we're together in this. You know, I think that makes a lot of sense. So try to, I always, when we do these entrepreneurial journeys here, I always have the challenge to say, think about 2 or 3 people you want to have together on this journey with you and invite them, you know, have lunch with them or have dinner conversations and invite them. And then potentially they have 2 or 3 friends they think might be interested as well. And then from there, you can build a movement inside your organization. Hope that helped Karen as well, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
many others listening. Yeah. And watching. No, thanks very much for that. We are fast running out of time, but I just have a couple more questions. Firstly, I think I'd want you to state the obvious in terms of what the benefits of social entrepreneurship are for companies. Because I think sometimes we'll overlook it and kind of assume it's obvious. So maybe if you could help to make that clear for us.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, we have like there are 2 ways we're going about this right now. Like one is I'm responsible for a business ranking with a newspaper here in Brazil, and this provided me access to data of 420 big corporates. So I know how much they invest in innovation. I know how much they invest in sustainability. I know if they have dedicated teams to that. I know if they have structured processes for entrepreneurs, if they have mentoring, if they have investment funds, et cetera, et cetera. So what we did is what we looked at, okay, what are the companies who have all this and who are the companies who don't? Or to a much lesser degree. And we built 2 clusters. And then we looked at how are the 2 clusters doing differently in terms of employee satisfaction, retention, client satisfaction, cost saving, access to ESG funds for cheaper cost of capital, et cetera, et cetera. What we found statistically relevant first, from an innovation perspective, companies who have that more structured, produce more ideas, implement more ideas, have more like products developed in the last 3 years as part of their new revenue streams, and have more significantly more sustainable products in their portfolio. So from an innovation perspective, no doubt. From an HR perspective, we haven't found significantly differences regarding employee turnover, absenteeism, and illnesses, but we have found significant positive correlation with organizational climate. From a customer perspective, we have found that customer retention is better. And from a financial perspective, we have found that the companies who have that better structured, they report more cost reductions and they report cheaper cost of capital because they can access ESG funds others can't. So that in terms of numbers, and we have a report on that. If you want to have that, like send me a message on LinkedIn and I'm happy to send it to you. And the second way we're going about that, like one of our members now, she's doing her PhD at King's College in London, Juliana Travassos, and she's doing a follow-up on all the projects we coached during the last years getting in touch with the entrepreneurs to know, did it get implemented? If it got implemented, which kind of financial benefits did it generate? How much investment was necessary, et cetera, et cetera? What kind of impact did it generate? How did you measure impact? How was that for your career, et cetera, et cetera? And if it didn't get implemented, we're asking like, okay, why didn't it get implemented? Wasn't it the right time? Wasn't the leadership change, or like I changed departments, or I left the organization, or stuff like that. And by that, we're trying to figure out, okay, the investment put into entrepreneurs, after how many months or years does it pay back, and does it pay back at all? We have a glimpse that it's paying back, but we're going into the nitty-gritties here.
That sounds really fascinating. I think, yeah, if we could get a hold of some of that data, I do encourage people to reach out to you on LinkedIn. I'm sure you to connect with everyone. So I'm sure you have a flood of LinkedIn requests coming your way. In the last minute that we have, Heiko, could you just give us one last word of wisdom for our learners, those that are watching live today?
I think like, from everything I said, if you convince the client, this is very powerful. So if you convince a client to be with you on this, there's no stopping. But I think there's one caution here.
Yeah.
Just like in the field of social entrepreneurs, once you bring your passion into the business, you have a higher chance of burnout, because it's not just your job anymore. It's a passion project. It's about you. It's about your values. It's about what you think is important. It's about what you think the company should be doing in order to make this planet a better place for everybody. And there two things help a lot. So there's one chapter on the Ikigai here. I don't know if you heard about Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept of reflecting about, what am I good at? What does the world need? What can I be paid for? And who knows his stuff, does it live? What am I passionate about? And the intersection of these four questions, if you can get that space, that will be your Duracell battery, which keeps you drumming when all other bunnies have stopped drumming. So this is, know where your fire comes from. And know that much, that you say like, and if this fire is not nurtured by the organization I work for, despite all my efforts, I'm gonna change. Because then you're taking control of your career and your future. And you're leaving to be a follower, and you start to be a leader. Because if you're just a functionary, just an employee, running behind the music which the organization is playing, I think you have a more boring professional life. It's going to be more secure, but you're going to have like the downside on the psychological side of things as well. And it's going to be a much more intense, but I think a more intensive and rewarding and interesting ride you're going to have along your career.
Absolutely.
And know where you recharge your batteries. Like, this is why I think the League of Entrepreneurs is so important for me, because this is kind of where I recharge my battery. And it's a very powerful source, beyond nature, sports, and all that. So I think that's a big point. And be cautious about, depends where you are in your career. The people who are talking about purpose and doing this are normally people like me, more than 40 years old, my economics are okay, so I can invest in that. And I'm always a little bit more cautious with the youngsters who need to build their reserves first. So maybe you need to be a little bit more functionary at the beginning to gain the financial independence to say, like, I took that from other entrepreneur, Dennis, who worked at big e-commerce platform in Germany. When he left his job, he said, like, now I'm just doing cool shit with cool people in cool places. And I adopted that for my philosophy as well now. But you need to get to that stage. So be a little bit more cautious at the beginning. But if you are at that stage, go for it. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but it's been a cool ride, and you're going to have cool stories to tell to your grandchildren one day.
Absolutely. And on that very encouraging note, Heiko, I'd like to thank you for being with us today, for making the time to speak to us and share such rich insights from your career and from your own hero's journey. So thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
All right. And many thanks to all of you who have tuned in live for this webinar. We know it's a bit of a sacrifice. Most of the times you are working. So thank you for joining us. And I hope today's session has helped to give you a better understanding of social entrepreneurship and all that it entails. Remember that this is a safe space for learning, and you'll get out of the course what you put into it. So let's continue to discuss and engage meaningfully on the various course topics. And feel free to throw in your own personal experiences. And having said that, I know AI can be useful, but in this case, we would really love to just hear from you as the human being with your own story and perhaps with your own hero's journey. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the platform. Enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye for now.